Now Robert, as a young squaddy, one of his first duties in the British Army was getting a call one morning to jump in a van and go to Lockerbie.
And if I'm on the road here, there's an old church there with a graveyard in the back of it, and there's cabin crew and passengers impacted in the graveyard. Copper come in, plain clothes, you know, a bag, clear plastic bag that was all red, somebody's face, half their head inside the bag. So you had to get down on your hands and knees with no gloves on and dig them out of the grass and put them into body bags or bin liners. So we've got his legs, we've got his body, we've got the shooters. Lift! And we lift, he just disintegrated. And I opened the door, and you know the old pictures you see for Belsen and Auschwitz, you know, the bodies all piled up? That's what it was like in this room. It was like something at the cover of a horror movie. People's faces and their chest, arms, legs, but just lying about.
Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of Craig Houston Talks to podcast, and my guest for this episode is Robert McAllister, who is an ex-soldier, joined the British Army at a very young age, an author, and got some incredible stories. But what we're going to talk about today is something that a follow-up to something I've done in a previous video where I spoke about Lockerbie and some of the strange going-ons that happened there. Now Robert, as a young squaddy, one of his first duties in the British Army was getting a call one morning to jump in a van and go to Lockerbie, and we'll be talking about that. So Robert, thanks very much for coming on. So tell us a bit about what happened before Lockerbie, where you grew up, what age you were in the army, and what that was like before we go into the main topic.
Okay, thanks for having me on your show, Craig. My name's Robert McAllister, and I joined the British Army in 1985. I served with the Royal Highland Fusiliers from 1987 to 1995, and proudly so. I grew up in Scotstoun. Came to a typical working class family, grew up in Scotstoun. And I think I really wanted to be in the army since I was a wee boy. To clarify that, I was at a funeral a couple of years ago. It was my mate's cousin that died, and they stayed on the back phase in Yoker when we were growing up. And his uncle says to me, I remember you playing soldiers in the back when you were a wee boy. I said, I know, I joined the army, and he nearly collapsed, you know. So away we went, and we were in Redford Barracks in Edinburgh.
So sorry, what age were you when you joined the army, Robert?
I joined as a boy soldier. I was in an English regiment, and I moved to a Scottish regiment.
So you've been 16?
No, I was the youngest soldier in the British Army for a couple of days. I was 15 years. I was under 16 when I joined. I can't remember the exact dates. I think it was 15 years, 11 months. I think for 2 days I was the youngest soldier in the British Army. Apart from that, that was done in England. It was the Royal Corps of Transport. I struggled with driving, so I transferred out of the RH, the Royal Highland Fusiliers, and proudly so. It made me marry a man than where I was before that. So eventually we got to Redford Barracks. I joined just as the battalion had returned from West Berlin. Now, for your viewers that don't know, Germany used to be separated east and west, as you'll probably know, and you had 4 sectors in Berlin: the Russian sector, French, American, and British, and the battalion was there. They had arrived in Redford Barracks, I think it was March 87, and I joined just not long after that. When we arrived there, I can remember getting into the front gate at Redford Barracks, and C Company were preparing to go to Royal Guard at Balmoral, Balta, and they were on the parade square with other number ones and ceremonials, Green Archers, people coming in after arriving at matches, or people shouting and bawling, you know. We put us in the guard room, we went across to the commanding officers to get met with him, and he came from I think it was the Highland area, the west end of Glasgow anyway, and he spoke with a posh Glaswegian accent, and he said, you know, this is the Glasgow and Ayrshire Regiment. It's a very, very small pond with a lot of sharks in it. So you better watch what you're saying, watch what you're doing. And I went to 6 Platoon B Company in Redford Barracks. They took me up to the company office with the COS, Company Orderly Sergeant. Watch was a duty corporal, so he took us down to meet the Sergeant Major. And I'm going somewhere with this story, believe it or not. And man, seen a Major Hislop, I think it was, and he said the exact same words as the CO had said. So they said, right, whoever, I've gone to 5 platoon, I went to 6 platoon. And when I got there, it was like an old 8-man room, but it had been split. So you had a big 6-man room, then a couple of 3-mans in it narrowed down. Now I'm a wee boy. We're in the army a while, but I'm a wee boy, and here I'm there. He was up the stairs. The platoon sergeant's office was just round the corner. Faber the boss died, and he gave me the pep talk, what to say and what not to say. And I've never seen anything like this in my life. I walked into this room, and here was a guy, full Glasgow, God rest his soul, with Stoning, with all his ceremonial uniform on. And this guy has got black masking tape taped all the use off him, and they're all looking at him. There's another guy, Wally Mulseys, are he as well. Wally was just sitting there bowing his brogues, and they're all looking at Big Full. And there's this guy in the corner, it's just 2 o'clock in the afternoon, interfering with himself, for lack of better words, reading a book, as if it was as if this was normal. You know, and I'm standing there terrified. What's happening? And here's this guy, immaculate, Glengarry, a bit of house on it. His gloves are all putting in a boot, and they're like, you're looking no bad there. And you hear this rustling, that guy reading Reader's Wives or something. So that was my introduction to the battalion. So I kept my mouth shut, which you've done in the days. I dare say it's still the same. And we went to Kenya. I think it was called Exercise Grand Prix. And it was just field firing manoeuvres and whatever, different locations. Come back from there, and everybody was buzzing because we were going to Northern Ireland. We didn't know where. There were rumours of Aucknacloy, Strabane, which is further up towards Londonderry, and other. They knew where they were going, but the rumour mill didn't. So we went to a place called Lidhythe in, I'm sure it was the January or the February, which is in South England, where it's called NITAT, Northern Ireland Training Advisory Team, and you get in, they build you up to this, they come and visit you, and you turn your camp into somewhere in Northern Ireland. And what they would usually do is doing in England, when you went to NITAT, they get an English regiment in, because they've got a big bit inside it. It's like a bit of West Belfast. Now we're going back to 1988. I think that place will now be more geared up for Afghanistan, Iraq, the Middle East as things progress. But at that time, it was strictly for Northern Ireland, and what they would do is get an English regiment in, and they'd play civilian population, and they would just, you'd be at patrol, and they'd play the part. But they couldn't get them this time, so they got all the older jocks, that's the older soldiers in the battalion, to play the civ pop. Mental. I can't mention the names, I get took to court. You'd have thought you were in Northern Ireland, we were pulling you in wee clothes and duffing you in and stealing your wallet. All good fun. So, we then comes back, it's continuation training in the camp. You're up in the hills in Edinburgh, and it's as if they call a find. You've found either a stash of weapons that's been booby trapped, and they bring ATO in, ammunition technicians officer, and you've got the cordon, and they go in with the robot and do the business. All that carry on. So we're building up, and we're building up. We still don't know where we're going. You can imagine the atmosphere. The battalion's not been in Northern Ireland for 3 years. I had a 2-year posting in Palace Barracks in 1983 to 1985, and this is their first time going back. So as we're getting training, getting ready, it's getting closer to the time for deployment, and now we know where we're going. The battalion knew where they were going now. You had the main body up in Fermanagh and us doing in South Armagh. 5 and 6 platoon went to RUC Middletown, which is Royal Ulster Constabulary, and 4 platoon went to TD. Now, I'm out of breath, sorry. Now, on the build up, we're all training, and the news comes through that the Special Air Service had collapsed an IRA active service unit in Gibraltar. And that, as we were building up to deploy, led to a chain of events that was quite devastating in Northern Ireland. And I think it started off with that the airport workers in Belfast wanted to take the 3 bodies of the active service unit, and they had to get flown into Dublin and then took up to the border, and there was no RUC escort to Belfast, so you can imagine running the gauntlet nowadays. That led to a chain of events which we had Michael Stone in the graveyard. I think the Royal Scots shot a terrorist walking down the Springfield Road the night before that or the same night. And then you had the 2 corporals that were butchered at the funeral when they drove into the cul-de-sac the following week. And then, as it settled, when we were all buzzing to go, our mothers were up the pole. We can only imagine, but you're 18, 19, and you're going to this place. You're wanting to go. That's your job. So we deployed into Northern Ireland. We flew into RAF Aldergrove, Belfast International. And I think we were choppered to the Ramad Barracks and just in Armagh Town, Armagh City. And then we jumped into the back of removal vans and drove down, all tooled up with all our kit, all like sardines in the back of a removal van. You know, we'd have thought nobody knew, but the Irish knew. They could take you to the game any time. So we get to RUC Middletown, and the highlight of the tour, Craig, was meeting Barry McGuigan every week at the checkpoint. He would drive down, and you'd see his face, and we'd all jump out, we'd all get photos, not talk, laugh and joke. He'd go into the south, then he'd come back, he would just get right through. But any time he was leaving, he always stopped and he always spoke to you a laugh, spam and all this kid on. A great wee guy. Halfway through the tour, July, the USS Vincennes challenged a plane coming out of Bandar Addis Airport. And Bandar Addis is in the Persian Gulf in Iran. There's also a naval base there and tooled up. So this plane was carrying an Iranian air flight, Iran Air, was carrying, I think it was just under 300 people. Between 260 and 290 people it was carrying, and it was challenged in the Persian Gulf. They never answered. The Americans challenged them again and then shot them down. They were all killed. But we did say at the time, I think there'll be a repercussion for that. So like I said, there was wee bits and bobs coming through, nothing exciting. We had no contacts, we had no IEDs, we had no bombings. It was literally seven months and it took out your life that you'll never get back. Big long walks, whatever. We comes back from there, I think it was October. We come back, the time the full battalion was back. And now they're focusing moving from Redford Barracks in Edinburgh to Oakington Barracks in Cambridge. Now, what that basically means is, for those that know, and for those that don't know, is you're going to be scrubbing the place before you leave. So it's spick and span, constant, bullshit baffles brains sort of things. And we're all ready to go and leave, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. Now, I don't know, I spoke about this before, and I kept getting my dates mixed up. The plane crashed on the 21st, and we come back on the 23rd. I keep on getting the dates mixed up. So, the camp's all clean. We're ready to go home and leave. It must have been the Thursday night. We're in B Company Lines accommodation. B Company accommodation, we call it Lines as in, it's a military term. And we had an old black and white portable telly. That's all we had in one of the rooms. With a coat hanger for an aerial. Right? So you've got the picture now, you've got that sort of thing that's all balanced. And a news flash came on. This is the days before the internet. This is the days before Al Qaeda and co. Put carnage right in your living room and you're eating your dinner. This was all new to us. We'd just come back from Northern Ireland. And what's on the horizon in the corner was quite horrific. So, wasn't it about 7 o'clock at night, we're all laughing and joking. Who'd got to the naffy, who'd get in the black carry on? Everybody was skint. Third week, getting to the third week of a monthly pie in the army. Live like kings for 5 days and get into the wreckage of dinners there. So the news flash comes on that there's been an explosion over Lockerbie. A plane has crashed. And you hear all the guys all moaning. And people just kept on packing their kit, 253, and their kit goes in the store you get when you come back. And then it was scaly parade outside the company offices. And a scaly parade means everybody has got to go. And the company offices in Redford Barracks, for them, if you're looking at Redford Barracks, face on to the main road, you've got the garden room there, the main gate, there's the barracks. Over to the left-hand side and straight down was all the company offices. Out to the right was all the stores. In the front, in the middle, was accommodation. You had two big courtyards there, used for drill, but nobody used. So they're all there. Must be about 7:30 at night. And they said, right, now I'm flying through this because I'm trying to give you the picture. They sent wagons down to Edinburgh with guys in them to clear the pubs and bring them back up to Redford. I get sent with other guys up to the married quarters at the back of Redford to chap the doors and tell them, get your kit on, grab your sleeping bag, your crash out kit. We've been called out. Now, that chap's this door, Big Colin Duff. He's dead and all. This isn't a good podcast at all, is it?
No.
They've all croaked it, right? So I chap's Big Colin's door. And Big Colin was older than me. I think I was 2-year-old when Colin joined the army. You know, so I chap's his door. He went, what do you want? I said, we're called out. He said, no, you're not. I said, we're called out, Colin. I said, I can't wait. He said, you put all that kit on, you come up here in that pissing rain to noise and have a bit of plane crash. And then that time with the all chap, hurry up. We get stood in there. So B Company of the Mace men. And the Spearhead Battalion, which is the one that's on 24 hours notice to move. And they would usually go to Northern Ireland or help out what's called MACP, Military Aid to the Civil Power. But I take it because we were closest. They were up in Inverness. We get deployed first. So I went down in the advance party and we had, I think it was 2 Land Rovers, 3 wagons, 3 4-ton trucks. The mood in the parade square in the wagons going down to Lockerbie was fantastic. A good 20 minutes. Then the boys get their sleeping bags out. They jumped in their DOS bags. I can remember I couldn't sleep. I remember driving down. And for people that are familiar with the old Army 4-ton trucks, it had canvas sides and a canvas roof, pitch black. And I remember looking up, and all you could see was blue lights in the distance, all converging. Just miles away, you could see the lights all converging, heading towards Lockerbie. So we eventually gets to Lockerbie, and we're driving up. And I remember, as we're driving, the wagon turns round, you can see Lockerbie on flames, and this woman ran by, old woman, shuffled. It was freezing with her nightdress on, with her screaming, with her Polish chasing after him. Everyone just laughing and joking. But they don't know because the way the wagon turned, you seen the glare, but then the wagon went somewhere else towards the secondary school. So we get to the secondary school and there was no janitor there to let us in, and the wagons had we getting parts of it, freezing. And one of the boys was where he said to me, if it's that cold down here, I wonder what it's like up there. I was -60 where they were. And we get in there. I think we pulled out the big blue pudding mats that you get in the gym. Slept on them. Got up early the next morning. And basically, without getting into too much fine points and nitpicking, basically, they were just sending guys here, guys there. And our area of operations was up in the hills, round about the Tundergarth area, where I would find out later. That's where the cockpit had landed, right? So we goes up, and we get strapped up and we're walking down. And all we found was a US mailbag in the trees, you know. You can imagine it, wintry trees, no branches. And she said, no, just leave it. The guy took what we done. There was no GPS in there. It was an intersection, resection for the map reading, get your point. Grid left it, and that was always fun. So we must have got back to the school for lunch, just before lunch. And when we walked in, There's a lot of Scottish soldiers, jocks as they're called, sitting in the corner, well, spread out, all eating. But nobody was talking to each other. They're just all eating, all deep in thought, you know. And we were all laughing and joking. And this officer said, "Where have you just came from?" And the corporal, with his waist turned around and said, "About the Thundergath area." Explained to him. He said, "Right, when you finish your dinner, go up to go and get a driver and go up to the cockpit." So, nobody any fags. I remember standing outside. There's an old man for the Salvation Army smoking. And one of the boys said, "A fag off you, mate." Well, there you go. And this fag went round 6 right? And the old guy was looking. And we come back in that night, everybody get 40 base in the hedges with their dinner. So I never walked by the Salvation Army now. I never did. That just solidified it. So we jumps in the wagon and we goes up to Thundergarth, where the cockpit is. Now that would be about 6 mile, so say 8-10 kilometres for the school. It felt about 100 mile. You know, a wee country roads they're all trying to go up. We don't know what we're getting into yet. So we get up, and the place is mobbed. And if I'm on the road here, there's an old church there with a graveyard in the back of it, and there's cabin crew and passengers impacted in the graveyard at the church. There's a road here, and now there's the cockpit. There's a lot of coppers. I think they were the first soldiers there. Well, they relieved them. And with the Sergeant Major lined us all up. And in the army, you get a thing called area cleaning. They do it every morning, where they walk through the camp and pick all the fag outs up and all the bits of paper. Well, this was area cleaning. But this had been notched up a couple of levels because you were picking up people and bits of plane wreckage. So we're all lined up. Sergeant Major giving his brief, blah, blah, and this copper come down, plain clothes, you know, a bag, clear plastic bag, it was all red. It was somebody's face, half their head inside the bag. And he said to the Sergeant Major, no, don't pick anything up, just get the bodies out of the way. This is now a crime area, we need to get the bodies in the. So we'll call them impact areas, Craig, because they weren't just lying there in the ground. They were actually, the ground was wet and whatever, and when they've impacted, they've went a bit of fit into the ground. So you had to get down on your hands and knees with no gloves on and dig them out of the grass and put them into body bags or bin liners, right? And then they get took down. So basically, the Lockerbie plane was PanAm Flight 103, made of the seas, and it was carrying 259 people. It took off in Frankfurt a couple of years earlier, and it landed in Heathrow for a pickup. And it was sat there, it was delayed by about 45, 50 minutes, because had the bomb went off when it was meant to go off, you have a lot of conspiracy theories now saying it was an altitude bomb, or this carry on, right? It was a timer. The timer was set, and just by bad luck, it fell on top of Lockerbie. Had it went when it was supposed to have went, been there the Atlantic, they'd have found bits of wreckage. It would have been hard to go through the criminal case that they'd done, which doesn't really concern us. So that plane took off 45 minutes late. It was just ready to head towards there and make its turn when it blew up. And the bomb, I believe, went off in the underbelly just under the cockpit. And it must have ripped the cockpit off, and the cockpit went that way, and the plane went up till the engine stalled.
Wow.
Now,
of course, the engines are not connected to the cockpit, they'll just keep...
They just kept going. Now, at the time we were told that some people, before they were knocked unconscious, would have been aware for about 10, 12 seconds of what was going on. You can imagine the fucking terror, excuse me. Right? And the planes went up, the cockpits went that way. I think it bounced a couple of times before it landed. It took the fire brigade 26 cuts just to get the captain it. Right, was all. And it was one of the planes, big old Boeing 747, with the bar first class lounge above the cockpit. Now, I never seen it. I was outside with Colin Duff, believe it or not. There's a picture of Colin somewhere in the Daily Record just after this happened. You see Colin standing at the side, the Glengarry and the White Hackle on. And seemingly there was a guy and he had two females pumped right into him. And they were all, and the guy for the fire brigade and the police were saying it was like rubber dolls, blow up dolls that had been deflated. And when they opened the seat belts, they just all crumbled into one. It was like a big bag of skin, bag of bones, right? So there was one that I've mentioned before, but not with you. Me, the Padre Michael Schooler, great guy. Stevie King. No, it was Wally Smith. I think it was Smith 1, 2. I said Smith 3. I think it was Smith 1, 2. In the army, if your name's Houston, there's another Houston, we would know you were the last digits of your army number. So I can't mind. It was Wally Smith, the blonde, he did one. And there was this big man lying, impacted into the ground. And he'd jeans on and his leg was pulled up and he'd the old terry towel and socks with the red, white and blue band on it. I never wore these socks for about 5 years after this. Right? Just couldn't put myself up these. That's how it can affect you that size. It can affect you that size. So we said, right, we've got him. So we've jammed him over our horns. So we've got his legs, we've got his body, we've got the struders. Lift! And we lift, he just disintegrated. Right? Some story with a guy's leg at 19 years of age, a couple of days before Christmas, and nobody's laughing. Now the army and the humour in the British military, any military, is quite dark. But even this couldn't, you know, and we're storing there. So again, it's quite sketchy. It was 1988. But then moves the bodies to the mortuary, which had been in Lockerbie Town Hall. They had prepared for this. They'd done an exercise on a jet fighter crashing in Lockerbie, but nothing to this, right? So the morgue, a wee town hall in Lockerbie, couldn't handle the amount of bodies. So they used the ice rink. So before that happened, we are debussing all these bodies up these stairs, us in the police force. And through the back, there's a mortician there. And remember the old mortician in Target with the big beard? He was a double of him, right? If it wasn't surreal, you'd have thought it was him. And
maybe it was.
It may have been. And I went into shock. And when I turned and they were all gone, and I was talking to him, and he's just cutting away at things, talking to me, there was nothing. He said, "You're doing that stair." And I opened the door. And you know the old pictures you see for Belfast and Auschwitz, you know, the bodies all piled up? That's what it was like in this room. It was like something at the cover of a horror movie. People's faces and their chest, arms, legs, but just lying about. So I get down the stair in shock, and they're away. There's nobody there. The town's now a military town. Everybody's there, but there's nobody. There's no white hackles, right? So I goes a walk, and I ends up in the outskirts of Lockerbie. And I never knew this. It was a Sadie Owl B company. Had put their stores, a big 12x12 tent. My pal was there, Wally Eyre. He's dead and all. I went to school with Wally. He's away and all. So Wally hadn't seen any of this, and Wally was a wee guy, blonde tea. He'd all, hey, look at me, wee ladies, man, you know. He went, look, got a cup of tea, I haven't got a smoke. He says, you alright? And I said, mumbling, and he's going, aye. A big windy, next minute the tent get blew down the hill. Right, and Wally's saying, come on, Ram, I mean, I'll see you later, Wally. And I went back into Lockerbie. And a guy called Ian Hiworth picked me up. We must have taken out roving patrols or whatever. And he took me back to the school. And the Americans had put all these phones out. I think there was 50 phones there. And they said, you can phone anywhere in the world. It's all free. They say, but when the families come, this becomes a sterile area. So you need to do your phone calls and that. Now. People were sitting there talking to the aunties in Australia for a good couple of hours. And I phoned my mother up and tell her where I was. Blah, blah, blah. Then the next day, Craig, I really can't remember much about it. I can just remember that the Gordon Highlanders were coming to get us. They were going to relieve us in place because they were Spirit Battalion. We were going home. They sent down buses they must have gone down in buses. There was rumours going about. You always need to do your research, as you know. There was rumours that the Gordon Highlanders had landed on the M74 on a Hercules aircraft.
I take it that didn't happen,
No,
Robert.
no, I spoke to a couple of Gordon Highlanders before I came on here just to clarify that before we look totally stupid. So no, they come down in coaches. As they come on, I soon be off. And the approach, the journey back to Redford Barracks was totally different from the journey going down. There was nobody talking. I don't think anybody spoke that entire journey. We got off at Redford and we were told that ScotRail, it's nearly midnight, ScotRail and National Express had held back trains in a coach to get us all home. You know,
From the barracks?
no, we had to, the army took us to either St Andrews bus station or Waverley. Right. And they brought us, but I don't think they charged us, we were just going. Now, there was no time to shiver. You know, a case of get your kit off, put it in a bag, tracksuit on. Now, this is December the 23rd, freezing. I went home that night with a pair of joggies on and a Rangers tap. Right? Me and my mate. And I hadn't shivered. And my hands, I hadn't cut my nails either. In the bits of my fingers, there's bits of red and black. And all under my fingernails, there's bits of people, right? So we get back to the old Buchanan Street bus station before the concert park, whatever it was built. So you could come out Buchanan Street, if you remember, and just walk straight across down into the... And I'll never forget, we're in shop, me and Kenny Morrison. Kenny's going to Govan, I'm going to Scotstoun. I've got a Rangers tap, he's got a big jacket on Sports Airlines, and you're after read. The two are looking down, and the whole place was jumping. Birds with wee skirts on and Santa hats, and all that, guys all pitching in corners and all that. And me and him just floated right through it. We were somewhere else. And we went home. I got a bath, went in my bed. Following night, got up. Went out with my mates we went to the old volcano in Partick, made famous in train spotting. We went there. Nobody spoke about it. We went back and nobody had spoke about it. And that was it. We get no counselling. We got a £50 acquittance roll payment as we were leaving Redford Barracks. And that was took half as our next pay. Right? There was no counselling. A lot of guys took really no well at it. Right? The police and the emergency forces were all counselled in treble time and whatever. The poor bloody infantry get nothing. The labourers of the country. An organisation of people that is consistently forgotten about the success of government, but that's another story. Now, we went to Cambridge, Craig. Nobody spoke about it. Everybody coped with it in their own way. I was not sober for 2 years.
Is that right? Off the back of?
I don't know. I think it was that. As I'm older now, I'm getting on now. I'm not telling my age. But I was younger then. And it was just drink, army, work hard, play hard. But I think now looking back, not me not looking for claims or nothing, I think that was my form of getting round it. Now, I mentioned, and we're nearly finished, Craig, I mentioned the Iranians earlier on, but it was a Libyan called Al Magraki who was done for it. I'm not going to get into that. I know that it was either 1967 or 1969 Gaddafi kicked the Americans out of Libya. In 1973 he put an oil embargo on them, and it was a bit of tick and tacking all the way through, right? And they jailed that Al Magraki same way. So years later, right? I'm in Baghdad, Camp Victory, Baghdad International Airport, the BIAP, working for the Americans. And we're sitting there, we were in the, what do they call it? The RRT, the Rapid Response Team. We were the British would call it the QRF. So we're sitting there, it's all Americans. And what I call the cookhouse, they call the DFAC dining facility. It was 2010, and it was headline news on all the American channels that Al Magraki had been released. And the Americans were going nuts. And they're all looking at me because they know I'm British, Scottish British. And I remember saying, I said, I was there, We picked the bodies up. I said, that's the Scottish National Party. It's later him out. Said he's close to death. I think he died 2.5, 3 years later. And I suppose that wrapped it up for me with Lockerbie. You know, I don't think he done it. I don't know who done it. And in this world of conspiracy theories and ideas, we don't know. We heard there was a lot of American soldiers on it. There was a lot of American church people going back. We don't know. We heard the special effects guy for Pink Floyd was on it, and so had missed it, and this had happened. And like I said, we went there as the army. We done what was expected of us. We didn't ask for anything back off them. But when you look at what other emergency services got, the treatment of the British Army was terrible. And what the Scottish Nationalists done, with releasing Al McGrackie, when he'd been found, I mean, the Americans were wanting put in the electric chair. I won't try and impersonate American accents. It wasn't as if they all went mad shooting guns into they were disgusted. Because release them. And I told them the same story I've told you. I don't think they were too bothered, really. But that was it, Craig. That was Lockerbie. If you've got anything you want to ask me about it.
I mean, loads. I just wanted to keep my mouth shut and hear it, you know, your version. Thanks for doing that. But there's just so much in there. So you're 19.
Yep.
And I mean, at that point, you'd been to Northern Ireland, but I'll take it you've not seen any active service at this point.
We had been to Kenya, which is field firing, which is an exercise. We had been to Northern Ireland, where you're wound up and wound up and wound up, and nothing happened.
Aye. So, unless something bizarre's happened in your early life, is that the first time you've seen a dead body?
Aye.
And roughly, to the nearest 10, how many did you see?
I wasn't in Rosebank Terrace. I was predominantly out in what we call the cuds, the fields, which had to be found nothing. And then you couldn't count the amount of bodies you seen, Craig, because they came in bits. There was a torso here, a leg there, this, that, and they were piled. I mean, I stand at 6 foot. I think they were piled about 8 foot high and 10 feet wide in that mortuary before they ran out. It was a real mess. You know, there was some woman in Rosebank Terrace area. She was going out, ready to watch Coronation Street or EastEnders, put the kettle on, taking the rubbish out, and woof, 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 and all these bodies were dotted about her, some still in their chairs. So, I don't think anybody survived it. I don't think anybody could have survived it. But what we were told later on in the passing, it wasn't anything official, and I've seen this in a documentary. When that plane, when the cockpit broke up, and the cockpit went that way, and the plane went up before it came down, they know wearing a seatbelt before they were sucked out of the plane, right? And they went unconscious. But they think some of them might have woke up about 800 feet when the air came back to a sort of normality. So, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, you would, and that would be it.
Horrific. So, you're 19, you hit the booze for a bit after that, you think that might be related?
It probably was. Either that was just a greedy alcoholic, but...
Aye, I mean, understandable that could have happened, but you're able to sit and talk to me about it today.
Oh, aye.
How long did that take before you were able to actually get it all, you know, processed in your own head and able to talk about what you actually seen as a young man?
We never spoke about it, Craig, right? We wouldn't have spoke about it. It's a guy who's done quite well for himself. He's still in the army. I'm not mentioning any names. And we were all sitting talking about it one day, and he just jumped up. He'd just been promoted. He said, I don't want any Paul rank, I don't want any Paul rank, stop talking about it, stop talking about it. I don't want to talk about it. And that was really the only time out with him. It was never ever spoke about it.
Was this a more experienced soldier to you at the time?
A couple of years older than me.
And when you think about some of the things that we teach and train our soldiers for, and to still not be able to cope with that, it must have just been horrific. And if you don't mind, if you don't want to answer this, I totally get it, but out of all the sights you've seen, could you give us an example of what the worst one was?
At Lockerbie? Well, I didn't get to Rosebank Terrace, Craig. I think Charlie Company Support Company were there. They were there. It would have been the mortuary, the Carnal House.
So even when you're saying you were picking a body up that basically disintegrates in your hands, you said, maybe go back to that, you said that when you passed the church with the graveyard, there was people, I think the word you used was impaled.
I didn't go in the back. My big mate, big Celtic supporter, big bully, we used to go to the football matches together, me and him, and noise each other up and go for a pint after it. And he says, I'm going in the back. He's coming up. I say, no, I'm not going in there. Sure it was big bully. Well, Sunday anyway. And he said, come on, run and be looked. And you could see, but I'd seen enough that side. You know, to get into a graveyard, I'm a Christian, right? To get into a graveyard where there's crosses and there's people, it was macabre, it was something like a horror movie. But you could see some of these people's features.
You could see it.
Aye. There was females, you could fucking see their features all distorted. And then you had to dig these up, and then it was just nothing. It was mad. It was like Hellraiser. Remember the really bad movies in the 80s? It was like that. It was just horror.
And how long were you actually stationed in Lockerbie then? Was you there a couple of days and then leave?
I think, Craig, we went down there. I don't think we were there that long. We went there on the night it happened. If it landed at 7 o'clock, we were on the road for the back at 8. So we got there for midnight, the full day. I think we were there for 36 hours, Craig. Then they got us back up. I think we were just sent down.
Is that because of a psychological reason, or was there a...
No, I think, looking back at it now, Craig, was there went like that with the Spearhead battalions in Edinburgh. Maybe they had something else that they might have been going to. I don't know. This is just me making this bit up. Well, the Royal Highland Fusiliers are 90 minutes tops drive for Lockerbie. Let's get them doing. Let's get guys on the ground. Let's show we're doing things. Let's do as much as we can, and that'll give the Gordon Highlanders time to get all their guys together, all their gear together, and then they may come down and if you call a relieving position. But I can't remember talking to any Gordons and remember saying, that's the buses we grab. They must have went and centralised our kit somewhere, got our kit. On the morning of the 23rd, where all the posts were arriving and certain TV presenters who have done their best out of this, you know. The soldiers are lined up now, the Sky News is there, and somebody said, get that fucking camera off me. They say, how? They say, the socials looking for me. You know, he's like, what? And then the coppers were on one side of the school and the soldiers on the other side. And we were on the pudding mats, and we left them, because we just took everything. They were left in the flare. We'd got our army sleeping bags, all the coats, we left them with nothing. And this Polish came in and tapped one of the boys, he said, is there any chance to a blanket off you? And somebody shouted from the back, you never gave me a blanket in Stewart Street, you take, oh! And then one of the police officers, policewomen, one of her handbag gets stolen. And she was going nuts and somebody said, you better phone the police. No, that sort of carry on. There was one of the trucks going down and the driver on an emergency stop. And like I said to you, it was a 4-ton truck. You had literally this space I've got here, Craig, and that was the tailgate, and the rest was all bodies all stacked up. There was a police there. And the driver hit the brakes and one of the bags burst open. And a horn lay on the ground, and one of the police went, no, man, it's a horn. And everybody said, no. No, so that was that carry on. And that's basically, Craig, as far as that, any more questions, I'll rejig things. But it was that black humour that carried you through, right? But you're 19, you're in the army. People think that's what you're meant to do. And then you've got all these emergency services, getting all the counselling, all the time off, treble time money. We get nothing. Tell to man up and get on with it. I think a few guys have took their lives out of it.
Well, I know I was at school at the time, at the tail end of my school, and one of it was a copper, lived just across the road from your school. He was sent down, and I think what got his head going was apparently when they put them into the ice rink, when they were piling the bodies up, the temperature was changing and the ice was moving.
Oh.
and the bodies in the bags were spilling out. And that was apparently something that triggered him. And unfortunately, not long after, Lockerbie was found in his garage with a tailpipe hose. Aye. So he obviously suffered terrible with that. And I remember, I don't know why I know this, but somebody knew his son, and that story get relayed to us, that was this guy came back and just wasn't the same, and eventually, unfortunately, led to take his own life. So there would have been, I mean, if that's a copper.
Oh, I can't mention any names, Craig. I could, but I know there's a few guys that never recovered from it.
Aye. And I think when you're a soldier, and I know you were in a few different situations, combat situations, so when you see that sort of stuff, it could be anything's a trigger. So, you know, but I mean, that, particularly at that age.
And after a Northern Ireland tour in South Armagh, which is one of the most dangerous places in Britain, you know, a religious civil war had been going on in the province for hundreds of years. So you're getting there, and then that pressure of over sheer relief to come home. All your pals come back, no problems, and then go to that.
But see when you get the shout, you've seen the TV, the news breaking as we all did that night, and it will probably be in everybody's memory that lived through that. So you've seen that. You know a plane's came down. But what did you think these were going to do?
I remember the OC coming in, George Hislop, great guy. Great, a really, really great guy, George Hislop, Major Hislop. And he said, right, all I know is so far is there's a plane landed in the middle of Lockerbie, and it's left a hole like a train tunnel on it. So we thought we were going there.
Small area, confined.
It's all going to be there.
Do you know, I'd never heard that before, about the cockpit going one direction, and then the engines, obviously.
Aye, the cockpit went, but it must have blew right underneath it. Now, Pan American flights were supposed to be reinforced in the building of them, the mechanics, because they were to be used to reinforce NATO with American troops should the Russians come across the border. So I think it punched a hole the size of a golf ball through it. We imagine the shockwave as well. It'd have been inside. I don't know if they had the bomb-proof things then. But as far as we know, it was flying along, and the cockpit disintegrated. The cockpit went that way, and that flipped and went up, and then the engine stalled and it came right back down.
Because that would explain, when we see all the documentaries and stuff that's been made since, and some of them talk about the blast zone area, there was things found in Cumbria, parts of that plane, and that kind of never made sense to me. I thought, I know it's quite high up, so maybe when you take much an angle, but if you think the blast's here, gravity takes effect, that goes up and goes on for how long before it comes down? Bits will be falling off everywhere.
Well, just like you're saying, Craig, sorry for interrupting. When we were going down in the wagons that night, somebody was saying, I wonder what the meal's going to be if you're on a plane. And one of the boys says, I wonder what the movie's going to be. And I can't remember his name, but that same guy said to me about 7 months later in Cambridge, Rab, they found the movie in the Irish Sea. It was a fish called Wonder. They'd actually found it. The debris. Well, you're saying debris went everywhere. Because I think they were finding mailbags in Cumbria.
I remember. Yeah, I remember one of the I think near Hexham, out that way. And you think, that's a bit of a trek. But then, it's high up. You know, it's probably about 30,000 feet. But when if the blasts made the separation, because I actually always wondered about that as well, because the cockpit, the famous photograph of the cockpit half, you see that, were you actually at that?
That's where we were. I wasn't inside the cockpit, we didn't get in, we weren't allowed in.
Yeah. See the cockpit, you were saying that the bodies hit the ground and they actually go in. So was the other half?
No. I think it must have been in, Craig, and I could be getting mixed up here, so don't take this as gospel to your viewers. If you're thinking, anybody's thinking that was half the cockpit and the other half was in the ground, it wasn't. It just impact. They were concertinaed in bits and bobs, hence probably the amount of cuts to get the pilot out. And they three up the stair, well, they've been lying, so the fire brigades went in. And it was just something you weren't expecting.
See, even thinking back, and the passage of time obviously can help or hinder, I suppose, your thoughts. But see, was it just like, this isn't real? Did that make it easier to actually cope with it, the total surrealness of the situation, to just be able to get on with it?
I think, Craig, it was the black sense of humour of the soldier that carried us through, and the discipline. I'm very proud to have been in the Royal Highland Fusiliers, and that was proven years later when I was contracting, how high a standard they were, especially right across the Scottish Division and the British Army in a whole. But without a shadow of a doubt, Craig, down there, the black humour carried us through. And then I think we were put it in rooms in my brain and locked the door, and that one time we spoke about it, the guy, no talking about it, just wasn't happening. And some people took it quite bad.
When we all go south at some point, whether that's going down the M74 and M6 or even the train, I remember years after it, I was going down to Leeds, I think, in a course, and I was going down in the train, and you could actually see years later, still there was craters, there was, where there was impact damage to the.
See, I think they had practiced, Craig, for a jet fighter crashing.
But if that's me as a civilian going by in a train years later, seeing still to that day, obviously it'll be fine now, you could still see the impact craters and stuff like that in the middle of hills. What goes through your head when you're going down that M74 or even in a train?
I just ignore it. Yeah. I just say I was there, and if anybody brings it up, briefly talk about it. I wouldn't even, I don't want to talk about it, I'll tell you what happened. But that's it. It was very, very, very surreal. To come from south of Mar in the infantry, late 80s, all the trouble in Northern Ireland, nothing. Because of the Glasgow West Coast Regiment, did that have something to do with it? I don't know. That's another podcast, funding and things like that for these people. But we never get anything. And then we got fucking up. Sorry, then we got hot with that. And that was just, how do you weigh it up?
Well, I think it's the most remarkable bit of the whole story. It's not actually the whole story is remarkable, but one of the sort of weirdest bits for me is the fact you saw it in the telly, you were going down, you spent a bit of time there because you're saying the first place you get posted to, there was no really much happening. Yeah. And then, maybe 12 hours in before you're actually in this carnage.
We arrived there, Craig, at we'll go for midnight. It might be before or after, right? The place was still burning. You can see the glow. There's bullets everywhere. Shock. Poof. Up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So we're now 12 hours into it, right? So we go for, say, 6, 7, 8. So we walked about for 3-4 hours, found nothing. And then the next couple of hours, we'd have been into the cockpit. Then we went back down, like I said, the phone, got our dinner, went to our bed, got up the next day. I can't remember where we went that day, Craig. All I can remember is going back. So maybe no, I never seen anything that was that horrific. It was going to block my mind out. But the 23rd of December, I'm sure it was the night that we came back. I can't remember anything we'd done that day. Apart from the morning, up for our breakfast. And all the banter was happening. But no, I couldn't. I'd be a liar. I'd need to start making things up to carry on with that timeline. After that first day, mostly it's a blank. And we were only there for maybe 36, 40 hours, if that. Because we get called out at 8 o'clock on the 21st, 22nd. We were in Glasgow for midnight, the 23rd. So it was before 8 hours. We were away. Say 4 hours travelling, another 10 hours knocking about. I'd say 3 or 4 hours in the cockpit, between the cockpit and the mortuary. Picking the bodies up, putting them in the body bags, going to the mortuary in the town hall, taking shock, walking about. And I remember before we were putting the bodies in to the back of the wagon, there was a freelance journalist there, right? Taking photographs of the church and the Ingwe, and the police took the camera off him and ripped
Seriously?
Said he was a ghoul, took the film off him in the camera. I didn't get his camera, but I'm sure they took the film off him.
There was a documentary, I think, or it might have been the serialisation that was done of the doctor.
The Jim Squire.
Aye. Might have been that. But there was mention of Americans turning up.
We never seen anything like that, Craig.
Just when you'd said you found a mailbag, it was a US mailbag, that was the first.
I know my mate Big Phil, God rest his soul, he said, Rab, for 2 minutes saying I was a millionaire. I said, what are you talking about? He said, we found a bag up there. It was just full of US government bonds that were unsigned.
Serious?
I said, where's it now? He said, it's all been held in, you know. I never seen, but you heard rumours that there was guys in white jackets there injecting bodies with things. A lot of nonsense. It was us, the police, the fire brigade, the ambulance, civilian workers and a couple of ghouls and people that didn't know what was happening. That was it.
Did you much? I've heard some absolutely amazing stories about some of the locals and some, particularly the women there, and they were gathering all the clothes together and they made sure they were, you know, presentable to go to the families, and they were doing that work for weeks after it. Were you in contact with many of the locals at that time?
No, I think as you're going on to that, Craig, I think there was an old gentleman. You know, he lived about 100 years old now, or past. He was an old man, old gentleman. You know, the tweeds and the glasses and the dapper look. And he came out and he thanked us. I think he had been in charge of the contingency plans for this jet that was going to crash. And I think that's the only time.
That and the Salvation Army guy.
Well, the Salvation Army, I'll never forget that. The guy said, there you go. So we all guy, you know. And it was about sixes. And he dished all his fags out, and that night we came in. Whether you smoked them or you get 40 benching in hedges. Which was a world of difference. And that civilian interaction with the local populace, just that old guy at the end thanking us before we went on the coaches, the Salvation Army, and that would basically the story about the temperature in the ice rink. I'd heard that before. I think it was the RHF medics that were running that before the Gordons come down. So that had been further on. Years later as well, I was in Kabul, and the project manager had been one of the loadmasters on the Chinooks. We put a lot of bodies on Chinooks as well. And he was telling us, and I said, I probably met you because we were put him in. He said, God, I never knew that. And he was telling us he had been called out, and they had, I think they were in Swindon. And they came up with the Chinooks for Swindon. And he was telling me that they could see this glow on the horizon as they were coming. And I don't know what had in the Chinooks. And it was the Special Forces Chinooks, things I think they had, but the Chinooks anyway. So I don't know what the GPS would have been in the days, 1988. And I remember saying to me, he we're checking all our maps. We said, Glasgow's too far away, and that was the glow of the...
Well, that's the thing. I know, as you said earlier, that the plane was due to go over into the Irish Sea at air. But if that blows up much further north, it's landing here.
It turned at air, Craig. That's what made its left turn across the Atlantic. So it would have devastated air.
Aye, if it came straight down. But it didn't come straight down. It flew on, you were saying, right? So could that have possibly have landed in Glasgow?
No, because...
But even air, I mean, it's horrible what happened in Lockerbie. The amount of people lost their life in the ground, one whole street disappearing. But for the grace of God, it could have been even worse. Even hitting air, Kilmarnock.
If that had thought a bigger populated area, Craig, you were talking more than 11 people getting killed on the ground. I think that's what it was on the ground, 11 people were killed.
Certainly I think it was less than 20. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably a matter of minutes for a plane flying it.
Oh, aye. So when that boom, you're just sitting there, you're settling down now, you're just you're settling into your plane, and for that split second, and the plane would have rocked. You'd hear all the screaming. And then it disintegrates.
It's not a nice thought, is it? It's not a nice cheerio to the world.
People weren't there. When I go a long flight now, I was talking to a guy a few years ago. He said, you talk a lot in more colourful language. He says, you talk a lot of rubbish. You're no fear of flying. You've walked through the world. I says, the minute I got on that plane, I did two things. I fastened my seatbelt and I take 6 sleeping tablets. And that's what I done every time I went. Getting into Afghanistan and coming back there, I was always overloaded with sleeping tablets because I don't like flying.
It's no fear of flying, it's a fear of bomb.
it's no fear of flying, Craig, it's the fear of going through the clouds. I've only had 2 nightmares about Lockerbie, right? And they say that you can only have dreams in places that you've been, you see. But one of these dreams, I'll tell you the two, and we'll be quite quick. One of these dreams, for some reason or other, I'm in Stockholm, waiting to go on this plane, in this airport, and for some reason it's Stockholm. So we all got on the plane, and it's a jumbo jet, and you get 3 rows, the 3 seats here, the 5 seats here, and the 3 there. And we're all sitting, I know everybody, we're all sitting talking, we're putting our, God's honest truth. And then we're flying, and then the next minute the plane turns into a roller coaster. And I'm up and down, and I'll wake up all caked and sweating, halfway out of the bed. Once it happened. And the other one is, we're on the plane, and the plane's flying, right? And I got to put my seat, and I'm going to the toilet. And I'm walking down all these stairs, and I open this door, next minute I'm in the clouds, flying right through it. And I woke up, and I'm, that's the only real trauma that I would say that I've had, but subconsciously, that eyes must have been affected.
No, it's particularly at that age, and you know, if maybe your life had went round about the other way, where you had been to the Balkans and then went there, it's maybe something that you could cope with a bit better.
You would just brush it off.
Aye, but it was the first, you just said it yourself, the first time you seen a dead body, and you actually can't count how, even in the nearest 10, how many you've seen, because there was so much. Well, Robert, listen, thanks very much for sharing that with us.
Craig, thanks very much for taking the time to highlight this.
Could you do me a favour? The reason that we started this because I know you'd started your own channel, and you spoke about Lockerbie on that. Do you want to just tell the viewers a wee bit about your channel, the name, and how they can find it?
My channel is called, it's not my channel, it's our channel. It's a team here, the team of No Go to MD. It's called Eyewitness Podcast. And you'll find it on YouTube, Spotify. It's shortly gone on Patreon. We've done 2 very, very small, not as in-depth as topics on Lockerbie. But like I said, if you're bored of Craig, and you want bored even more, you'll find us at Eyewitness Podcast, and we'll be glad to see you. Primarily for the military and the ex-contractors for the hostile environment. But if you've got a story, just come on and tell us it. You'll be made more than welcome. Craig, thanks very much.
No problem, thanks for coming. So there you go, guys. Go follow Robert on YouTube, give him a subscription, new channel. We've all been there, everybody that's got a channel was new at once, so every subscription counts. Watch his videos, share them, and support them. But listen, thanks very much, Robert, for giving us your time. And as I say at the end of all my podcasts, if you enjoyed this and you want other people to see it, do 1, 2 or 3 things. Hit the like button, put some comments, and hit share. That'll help put it into even more people's timelines. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. But most importantly of all, unless you're the type of person that thinks it's clever putting bombs in civilian planes, then no you. But
everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.